listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog, and yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Good morning, this is To The Point on GB News with me, Tom Harwood, and Mercy Maroki on your TV and radio and, of course, online. We're with you all the way up until midday with a show jam-packed full of today's biggest stories, lots of discussion and expert guests, and our opinions as well as yours.
Yes, so make sure you get in touch with those opinions on our usual email, which is gbviews@gbnews.uk, and we'll be getting to those throughout the show. But first, the latest headlines.
A very good morning. It's 2 minutes past 10. I'm Rosie Wright, keeping you up to date on GB News. The UK has recorded its hottest night on record, with initial data from the Met Office showing overnight temperatures didn't fall below 25 degrees in some places. Red extreme heat warnings continue for millions of people in England today, with amber warnings for most of the UK. Today, as temperatures are forecast to hit at least 40 degrees. National Rail has told people to travel only if absolutely necessary, and many train services across the country have been impacted. Dr Francie Jackson-Spence told GB News what the warning signs are of heat exhaustion.
Feeling a bit drowsy, you may notice that you feel a bit faint and dizzy as your blood pressure can drop, feeling nauseous, reduced appetite, and you can sometimes also get stomach cramps and things. When it gets a bit more extreme, usually you can cool yourself down and feel better within about half an hour. If those symptoms are prolonged over half an hour of trying to cool yourself down, it may actually be heat stroke, which is an emergency. And that's where a whole heap of physiological things go on in your body.
Conservative MPs are preparing for the penultimate round of voting to choose the next leader of the party. Tom Tugendhat became the latest contender to be eliminated last night. The former Chancellor, Rishi Sunak, received the largest backing from MPs, while the International Trade Secretary, Penny Mordaunt, followed closely behind. Foreign Secretary Liz Truss is on the ballot. So too is Equalities Minister Kemi Badenoch, who, despite securing the fewest votes of support last night, believes she can win.
I do feel confident. There's everything to play for. My colleagues are looking at who's going to be winning the next election, and I think I'm that candidate. So let's see what happens. Well, I think I'm getting support from all wings of the party. I'm the unity candidate as well as the change candidate.
Candidates have until 12 today to make their pitches to the party before the next round of voting. Conservative MP Mark Harper told GB News that he believes Rishi Sunak can restore trust in the party.
He's being honest with people about the economic challenges facing the country. He's not saying the things that are easy to say, that would be convenient, but he's telling people what they need to hear. And I think our members are very realistic people. They'll listen to his message about the number one priority is defeating inflation. And I think they'll also look at how he polls across the country, and they'll see that in him they've got someone who can lead that battle to try and persuade the public to give us what will be a fifth consecutive term in a couple of years' time.
As the race to replace him ramps up, Boris Johnson is chairing his final cabinet meeting. The Prime Minister defended his record on tackling COVID and steering the economy through the pandemic and the cost of living crisis. Mr Johnson also reaffirmed the government's commitment to reaching net zero emissions by 2050. Ukrainian forces have pushed back a Russian advance in the east of the country as fighting continues. In its latest intelligence report, the UK's Ministry of Defence said Russia's struggling to keep up its advance. They've been plagued by lack of manpower and stiff Ukrainian resistance. Wages are falling at the fastest rate since records began when taking account rising prices. The latest data from ONS showed paychecks dropped by 3.7% over the 3 months to May when compared against inflation. Meanwhile, the number of UK workers on payrolls has risen by 31,000 to 29.6 million between May and June. Meanwhile, our grocery bills have increased by over £450 in the last year. Retail research firm Kantar says the increase comes after the food and drink inflation prices hit the second highest level on record. Dog food, butter and milk are some of the products that have seen the fastest rises over the last 12 months. The government's expected to announce £11.5 billion of investment into train services in the north of England. It's going to be spent upgrading the Transpennine route, aiming to make trains between Manchester and York more reliable, less crowded and better for the environment. By 2025, there should be 2 extra trains per hour. Journeys should be 40% faster. The Transport Secretary Grant Shapps says the investment will address the imbalance in funding between the north and the south. Now, some breaking news in the last few minutes. The MP Tobias Ellwood has been stripped of the Conservative Party whip after he abstained in the support of confidence vote in the government. We'll bring you more on this as we get it. Right now, this is GB News. I'll bring you more as it happens. Now, let's head back to the point.
A very good morning. This is To The Point on GB News with me, Mercy Maroki, and Tom Harwood. We're on your TV, radio and online, and we've got another great show lined up for you to kickstart your Tuesday. And just to remind everybody, I don't know if I mentioned this yesterday, but it's my birthday today.
Happy birthday.
Thank you.
There we go. Well, let's start with the news that the Conservative MP Tobias Ellwood has been stripped of the whip by Boris Johnson for failing to support the government in last night's confidence vote. It's a really interesting point because he was actually supporting Penny Mordaunt. So now he can't vote for Penny today, so she loses a vote. It's really interesting there because this is a very much hotting up Tory party leadership race. Another person's going to be eliminated at 3 p.m. today.
Well, we'll be giving you the latest developments and analysis on all of that. And the other big story of the day, temperatures are set to reach over 40 degrees today. Network Rail is warning people not to travel by train because of the high track temperature. What changes are you making to cope with or even enjoy the heatwave? Let us know.
And a new House of Lords report is looking at the future funding of the BBC. We'll be discussing, in the age of Netflix, Disney Plus and all those other streaming services, should we still have to pay for the licence fee like a tax?
Yes, they've made some very interesting recommendations in that, so stay tuned for that debate. That's all coming up and much more across the programme. And get in touch, as usual. The email is gbviews@gbnews.uk, and we'll get to those throughout the programme.
Well, first, let's return to that news that the Conservative MP Tobias Ellwood has been stripped of the whip by Boris Johnson for failing to support the government in last night's confidence vote.
Yes, really interesting this. I hadn't considered what you mentioned just a minute ago, that this means he now can't vote because he's not a Conservative MP, so he can't vote for Penny Mordaunt.
That's right, he was backing Penny Mordaunt, and Penny Mordaunt actually went down by 1 vote yesterday. These are all very crucial numbers because there's no one that's miles ahead in the lead. Of course, Rishi Sunak is in the lead, but actually out of the other 3 candidates, there's not a huge degree in it. So this could actually really matter. But it's an interesting point. While the government say he abstained in this confidence vote, he says, well, it's true, he was on a foreign trip and didn't return to the UK.
Yeah, they're saying he refused to return, so there's an important distinction
That is a distinction because other people on that trip did return to vote in the confidence vote, but he didn't. And the other thing here might be that there's a bit of acrimonious nature between him and the current Prime Minister. He was one of the first people to call for Boris Johnson to resign.
Can't imagine why that would be.
So perhaps this is a little bit of retribution from the Prime Minister there.
His picture, we're just showing his picture there, for those who don't know who Tobias Ellwood is, he looks quite crazed in that picture. I'm not gonna
It does look a bit startled. Perhaps the flash startled him there.
People might remember Tobias Ellwood as during the Westminster Bridge attack, he was the Member of Parliament who actually was with PC Palmer, was it PC Palmer was the name? Keith Palmer, and was actually, I think, resuscitating Keith Palmer. So you might remember footages of him during that time, so he is that MP there. But, as we say, the Tory leadership contenders will be whittled down to 3 today, with MPs set to cast their votes in the 4th round. This comes as chair of the Foreign Affairs Select Committee. Tom Tugendhat was eliminated after receiving the fewest amount of votes, 31 in total.
Yes, the former Chancellor Rishi Sunak held on to first place, going up a little bit with 115 votes. The final two candidates will be decided by tomorrow.
Yes, well, joining us now to talk about this in more detail is the political editor of the Huffington Post UK, Kevin Schofield. Kevin, thanks for joining us today. I think we spoke to you last week. What's your analysis of where things are today? A few days on, it's been quite the last few days, hasn't it, for those contenders?
It has indeed, yeah. We're getting down to the real exciting point now. I mean, it seems as though Rishi Sunak has pretty much confirmed his position in the final two runoff. I think that's pretty much guaranteed. But the second place, the person who he'll go up against, is absolutely up for grabs. And, you know, you're just talking there about Tobias Ellwood losing the whip. He will no longer be able to vote for Penny Mordaunt. And, you know, at a time of fine margins, you know, that one vote could actually prove crucial. So we've got Kemi Badenoch, we've got Liz Truss, and we've got Penny Mordaunt basically vying for that second place. Now, Kemi Badenoch came fourth last night, but she is advancing round on round, and she actually closed ground on Liz Truss. I think Liz Truss will be a bit disappointed that her vote didn't go up by more. It went up by 7 yesterday. I think she'd have been expecting to make a little bit more of an advance. So yeah, all eyes now on Graham Brady walking into Committee Room 14 at 3 p.m. this afternoon to find out who the next person being kicked out of the race is.
Yes, it's interesting. I was speaking to Alex Shelbrooke a bit earlier this morning, a backer of Liz Truss, who was saying that he thinks that Liz might well pick up a bit of support from Tom Tugendhat. Now, that surprised me a little bit, because Tom Tugendhat seemed to be more on the left of the party. He seemed to be someone who's not really sort of signed up to that tax-cutting agenda of Liz Truss. But perhaps this is what her re-announcement this morning of wanting to reach 3% of GDP spending on defence, perhaps this is a bit of a cynical ploy by her this morning.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, it's just pure politics, isn't it? I think all three of those candidates that I mentioned will now be vying for Tom Tugendhat's supporters. I mean, what we've seen so far in the race is that the MPs don't tend to move as a block when their candidate leaves the race. I mean, Suella Braverman, I think, got 27 votes in the final round that she was involved in. She then came out for Liz Truss, but only seven more votes went towards Liz Truss in the end. So clearly those 27 Braverman votes went elsewhere. So we saw it last night as well. Penny Mordaunt put out a release very, very quickly after the result last night, describing Tom Tugendhat as a friend and colleague, clearly desperate for his endorsement. So we're still waiting to find out who Tom Tugendhat himself is endorsing. But yeah, that doesn't guarantee that everyone that voted for him yesterday will automatically vote for that person. So it'll be interesting to see where those votes go.
Yeah, absolutely. And we don't have to wait long, do we? Luckily for us here in the media, we'll be talking about it later on. I just wondered what you made or have made of Kemi Badenoch's performance so far, because looking at those votes yesterday, I mean, 13 votes, I think something like 13 votes away from Liz Truss. That's not a huge, or Penny Mordaunt, I can't remember which one. That's not a huge gap, really, for somebody who was the dark horse, has been the dark horse. And for many people who are not familiar with politics, seemed to have popped out of nowhere. She's doing really well, isn't she?
She is, and as I say, she's made progress in each round, you know, so which is quite interesting. And yeah, her vote went up, I think it was by 9 yesterday, compared to Liz Truss, who only went up by 7, and Penny Mordaunt actually went back by 1. So I'd say Kemi Badenoch, other than Rishi Sunak, was the big winner yesterday. So yeah, I mean, I think she's probably still the slight favourite to go out today, simply because she came fourth yesterday. But you know, if she can pick up quite a lot of the Tom Tugendhat vote, you never know. Maybe the supporters of, for instance, Penny Mordaunt might decide that actually it doesn't look like Penny's going to do it, and they want to stop Liz Truss, so they'll maybe give their vote to Kemi Badenoch. You might even get some Rishi Sunak supporters thinking, well, he's already pretty much over the line, so we can afford to give our vote to someone else again to maybe keep Liz Truss out of the final two. So that's what makes it so intriguing. So I would not be surprised if Kemi Badenoch actually came through the middle, really, and ended up going head-to-head with Rishi Sunak in the final runoff.
To what extent are we over-egging Penny Mordaunt here? Because looking at the numbers, Penny plus Tom doesn't get you through to 120, doesn't guarantee a spot in the final, whereas Liz plus Kemi very definitely does, whichever way round that ends up being. If we're going to be crude about sort of the ideological distinctions in this contest, it's going to be Rishi versus either Liz or Kemi, isn't it?
Possibly, although, as you mentioned earlier, you would imagine Tom Tugendhat, One Nation Conservative, his wing of the party, probably if they're looking at their options, who to go with, Penny Mordaunt is probably more likely to pick up more of their votes, and that could well propel her even further ahead of Liz Truss. I think Liz Truss would be pretty disappointed, really, at this stage that she's not second and isn't making more of an advance. But yeah, I think there was a feeling last night that because Penny Mordaunt's vote actually went down, that maybe her momentum had stalled. So this is a massive round for her. She put out a new video. It was either last night or this morning, very personal video about growing up in Portsmouth and pictures of her down the pub having a pint, all that type of thing. It was quite slick. Who knows, that might help win over one or two more MPs. She's put out a paper this morning on why she's supporting Boris Johnson's levelling up agenda. But, I still think in the final analysis, Liz Truss is probably the slight favourite to go into the final two, but it's so difficult to predict. I wouldn't certainly say that with any great degree of certainty.
And very finally, of course, it's the MPs, Conservative MPs, who will be making that decision before it goes to the Conservative membership at large. But eventually, they're hoping this person will go to a public vote in a general election. Who do you think, out of the candidates, would win in a general election?
Well, dearie me, it is quite difficult. I would imagine that I'd say that Rishi Sunak actually has been the most impressive overall candidate. He seemed to be the one who has the best grasp of the detail, probably the best communicator. However, we do know, obviously, that Boris Johnson's allies are absolutely desperate to stop him from winning. But I'd imagine if out of the four, if you were to ask Keir Starmer who he would probably least like to face, it would probably be Rishi Sunak, although I think Labour would maybe have a little bit of fun over his tax background and his wife's former non-dom status. So yeah, I think probably on balance, Rishi Sunak is probably the strongest candidate, which explains why he's so far in front. But that doesn't necessarily mean that once it goes to the members that he will definitely win. Any poll that's been done on the runoffs has pretty much shown Rishi Sunak losing to every other candidate. So it's certainly by no means a done deal that if Rishi Sunak, as we expect, gets to the final two, that he will win in the membership. I think it could be a really, really close run thing.
Well, Kevin Schofield, thank you so much for that analysis there. Really interesting there, especially as we're seeing that Tobias Ellwood also losing the whip there. Does that change the dynamics? Well, probably not with just one vote. But Kevin, thanks for joining us.
Yes. Well, we'll be discussing more of politics very shortly, but we're going to take a break. And, of course, we're going to be discussing that heat wave. You can't have missed that today. We'll be back in just a moment.
Hello again, I'm Aidan McGivern from the Met Office. The hot spell peaks today with the likelihood of temperatures never previously recorded in the UK. That's why there are weather warnings in force for extreme heat, because this kind of heat can have serious impacts. Now, there is a change on the way. Cold fronts are going to move in from the west. Already that change taking place towards the far southwest, parts of Northern Ireland as well. Cooler compared to yesterday, but for the vast majority, it's sunny. It's breezy, yes, but it's still very hot, with temperatures peaking by the middle of the afternoon up into the high 30s and even 40 or 41 Celsius, somewhere between London into the Midlands and Lincolnshire likely to be the hot spot. Scotland also likely to see its hottest day on record, 35 Celsius in the far southeast of Scotland, but cooler for Northern Ireland, for southwest England, low to mid-20s here. And we're going to see showers move across the whole of the country overnight, perhaps some thunder associated with these downpours as the heat clears away. And then still a warm night to come, but nowhere near as warm as it was last night. So slightly more comfortable. And a bright start for many on Wednesday. It's looking fine in the east, certainly first thing, with some sunshine. A few showers in the west for Wales, the southwest, and some rain perhaps turning up across eastern parts of Scotland. By the afternoon, as temperatures rise once again, we'll see some heavy downpours for central and southeast England. And in the east of England, temperatures will still reach 29 or 30 Celsius, but it's more comfortable elsewhere, I think. Low to mid-20s largely further west. And really, we're back to more typical summer weather rather than this extreme heat that we've seen over the last couple of days. And so the outlook looks mostly fine. There'll be some showers around, particularly on Friday. Otherwise, some sunny spells and temperatures into the high teens or low 20s.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV, on radio,
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
we don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know. The latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News. My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
A very good morning to you. This is To The Point on GB News with me, Tom Harwood, and Mercy Maroki, whose birthday it is today. We'll remind you that every time. Now we've got a jam-packed show full of stories and issues that you really care about today, so let's get right on with it.
Yes, and the top issue, which you would have noticed, I'm sure, is that it's the hottest day of the year. In fact, not just the hottest day of the year, the hottest day on record in Britain. Temperatures are set to rise to 42 degrees Celsius. We're going to our reporter, Ellie Costello, who is in London Fields Lido for us this morning. As you can see, there's people enjoying the sun there in that swimming pool. Ellie, it's really hot, isn't it?
Yes, Tom and Mercy, I hate to state the obvious, but it is really hot here at London Fields Lido. 33 degrees already this morning. It's only just gone 10 o'clock in the morning. It could climb another 9 or 10 degrees still today, so it's going to get really, really hot in lots of different parts of the country. We could see those record-breaking temperatures of 42 degrees anywhere from Yorkshire to the home counties. So lots of us will be experiencing that heat. And many of you watching on TV or listening on the radio right now, you might have really struggled to sleep last night. If that's the case, that's because last night was the hottest summer night on record, 29 degrees. But hopefully it does cool off a little bit tonight, but that's not before we see these scorching temperatures all over the country today. Well, let's talk to somebody who's been enjoying this Lido here, who's enjoying this heat wave. This is Mike. Mike, thank you so much for joining us. How was your swim this morning? Would you say a bit too hot or refreshing?
It's absolutely gorgeous. It's totally refreshing, just like being at the Mediterranean today, basically, and jumping into the sea.
It's
certainly the place to be, definitely.
It certainly looks that way, doesn't it? It feels like you're on holiday.
Yeah.
And how have you been coping in the heat? What are your top tips on how to deal with it?
I would say to people, draw your curtains, pull the blinds down about 7 in the morning, like I did yesterday, and keep everything shut, and it's amazing how cool it keeps your place. And just keep rehydrated, just keep lots of liquids. I carry a flask with orange squash, and possibly maybe a hat for some people is a good idea.
The flask is a really good tip because it keeps it cold, doesn't it?
It certainly does. Yeah.
And we've got the red weather warning as well today, and people are being advised to stay inside. I mean, you obviously haven't followed that advice so far today.
I mean, I'll have a very short walk after this in the woods, which is quite cool. And then I will be indoors for the rest of the day, basically.
Yeah, but you're also enjoying this heat. It doesn't happen very often.
You've got to get out. We don't get that much of it. So as long as you're sensible, you're absolutely fine in the heat.
Very good, wise words there, Mike. Thank you so much for your time. Well, there you go. You've got loads of people here at London Fields Lido who are really enjoying this summer heat wave. 100%. But, you know, there is a serious side to this as well, Mercy and Tom. A 14-year-old boy is missing and presumed to have drowned in the River Thames last night after he went open water swimming in order to cool down, and that is the 5th person to have thought to have died since Sunday. So there is that warning from the RNLI lifeboat spokesperson today, saying that if you do want to enter the water to cool down, go to a lido, go to a pool, put a paddling pool in your garden, but do not enter open water to swim because it can be very, very dangerous. And the general advice today is to stay out of that midday sun and to keep hydrated.
Well, Ellie, thank you so much for bringing us that. And of course, it is really, really tragic to see so many of these stories popping up over the last couple of days. Ellie Costello there at London Fields Lido.
Yes, a reminder that there are certainly risks associated with this weather. And we can speak to weather journalist Nathan Rao to talk more about this. Obviously, we've been hearing this for a few days, haven't we, that it could hit 42 degrees. And we are seeing some casualties, sadly, so far. Just tell us what the risks are today for people who are still wondering what they should be looking at.
Right. Well, the temperatures that we're expecting today are temperatures that we have never before seen in the UK. 42 degrees in the UK is not just very, very hot. It's something that we're not used to, we're not prepared for, and probably many of us will have never experienced these types of temperatures ever before. So it's a case really of if you enjoy the hot weather, by all means enjoy the sunshine, but be sensible and respect that this is a sort of weather that we are not used to. Don't go out in the sunshine during midday between about 11 o'clock and 3 p.m. Certainly don't be jumping into open waters, rivers, reservoirs, that sort of things. People die every year. I mean, I've been writing about the weather for about 15 years now, and every single year we're writing about people who die in open water.
Can I just ask, because there'll be people who are thinking, well, why would, it's cool, you're cooling down. I mean, what's the risk there? People won't see the obvious risk. So just explain that to us.
The obvious risk, first of all, is that you may not even be used to jumping into water that deep, but your body can go into something called a shock, which is when your body temperature is so high and you jump into water, the shock of the thing can knock you out for a couple of seconds, and that's enough time for you to fall into difficulties. If you're in rivers, there are currents that you will not be aware of, and they can sweep you away, especially if you go far out. As your reporter was saying, you can buy paddling pools, you can buy great big swimming pools that you can put up in the garden, fill them with water and do that, and there you're safe, but do not go into open waterways under any circumstance.
I suppose the big difference, when it's a huge body of water, it doesn't really warm up as much, it's much colder, and it's the differential between the temperature in the dry versus the wet.
Absolutely, and people do things, I don't know if you've heard of, I think it's called tombstoning, they jump off huge cliffs into this water, and you don't realise that your body can go into shock when you get into that cold water from being in the heat, and you can die in seconds. It really is very important not to go into open waterways during this weather.
But it does seem to be that it is just today and yesterday that we're going to see the real extreme temperatures. Looking forward to later in the week, we're going to see much nicer temperatures where it's all sort of fine to go out at midday, fine to sit out in the sun.
That's right. So yesterday we didn't quite beat the record, but today we are all keeping our eyes on this 42, and that is something that, thankfully, is only going to be today. There is a cold front coming in later in the week. Tomorrow it should feel a bit cooler. Southern England, southeastern England will still be in the 30s, but around the rest of the country it'll be much, much cooler. Then going into the rest of the week, it'll be cooler, but the heat is coming back. At the weekend, the temperatures are going to rise, primarily in the south, not to the levels that we've seen today and yesterday, but they are going back into the 30s again at the beginning of this week, next week, which may feel a bit cooler compared to what we've got today. It might be a bit of a relief, but the temperatures are going to be high and sort of up and down right through to the end of the month.
Can I just ask, what should we have one of our producers is heavily pregnant. I think she's 37 weeks. I was looking at her yesterday, just thinking, oh my God, this is the worst possible time to be pregnant in weathers like this. Just tell us what people like who have babies, for example, older people who need to be looked after, pregnant women. What particular precautions should they take to make sure they're not overheating?
The absolute key is to. It sounds obvious, but try and stay as cool as you can and hydrate. Sports drinks are great because they also replenish your electrolytes, so you're not just drinking water. But the thing with this heat is that it puts the body and it puts the heart under strain. So if you're elderly, if you're vulnerable, if you're very young, if you're pregnant, your body's already going to be under strain. This sort of heat, especially with the nighttime temperatures not coming down to take some relief from that heat, that is where the problem lies. So the key is to try and stay cool. Cold water, put your fingers into cold water, apparently that works, feet into cold water. Anything you can to keep cool, but just stay out of the sun. Don't get worked up, don't go out running, don't go around walking, miles and miles, just stay cool, and it'll pass by tomorrow about midday. It should be back to normal.
Well, some good news there at the end of it, and hopefully some days this summer where we're actually able to get out and enjoy the sun, as I'm sure most people want to do. Well, Nathan Rao, thank you so much for coming in and explaining all of that. I feel far better informed than all of the weather that we're seeing
And
now.
we've got nice aircon going in the studio today, so we're definitely keeping cool in here and following that advice.
I'm sure that's exactly the last thing that people sweltering at home might
just
want
not
to hear.
bragging or anything, but the aircon in here is fantastic. Anyway, after the break, a new House of Lords report has been looking at how we should be funding the BBC. Should we keep paying the licence fee? Should poorer people be excused from having to pay the licence fee? Those are some of the recommendations that this report has been looking at. We'll get stuck into that, but before that, a look at this morning's news.
Good morning, it's 10:32. I'm Rosie Wright, keeping you up to date on GB News. The UK has provisionally recorded its hottest night on record, with data from the Met Office showing overnight temperatures didn't fall below 25 degrees in some places. Red extreme heat warnings continue today for millions of people in England, with amber warnings for large parts of Wales and Scotland. Temperatures are forecast to hit at least 40 degrees later today. That would again break records. Senior Tory MP Tobias Ellwood has been expelled from the Conservative Party after he refused to support the government in yesterday's vote of confidence. Boris Johnson stripped him of the whip, meaning he'll no longer be able to vote alongside fellow MPs in the Conservative leadership election. Well, Conservative MPs are preparing currently for the penultimate round of voting to choose the next leader of the party. The former Chancellor, Rishi Sunak, received the largest backing from MPs, while the International Trade Secretary, Penny Mordaunt, followed closely behind. Foreign Secretary Liz Truss is also in the running. So too is former Equalities Minister Kemi Badenoch, who yesterday secured the lowest share of votes, but speaking this morning, says she believes she could win.
I do feel confident. There's everything to play for. My colleagues are looking at who's going to be winning the next election, and I think I'm that candidate. So let's see what happens. Well, I think I'm getting support from all wings of the party. I'm the unity candidate as well as the change candidate.
Wages are falling at the fastest rate since records began when taking into account rising prices. The latest data from ONS showed paychecks dropped by 3.7% over the 3 months to May when compared against inflation. Meanwhile, the number of UK workers on payrolls has risen by 31,000 to 29.6 million between May and June. TV, online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.201 and 1.174 euros. The price of gold currently stands at £1,426.43 per ounce.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News, investments that matter.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today. I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, Matt. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Good morning, it's 10:36 and this is To The Point on GB News with me, Mercy Maroki, and Tom Harwood on GB News. We're live on your TV, online and radio.
Now, could the licence fee be set to be abolished? Well, a House of Lords Select Committee has been looking at new ways to fund the BBC and whether the licence fee is in fact fit for purpose. Peers have rejected the Netflix or subscription service model because they don't think it will raise enough money.
Yes, instead, they think we should copy a model used in Europe, which is a universal household fee, similar to council tax. But should we be forced to pay money towards something we may not even use?
Well, joining us now is someone who thinks we should not. Rebecca Ryan, campaign director at Defund the BBC. Thank you so much for joining us here. I suppose, first of all, it's interesting that this is something that's being discussed at all. Clearly, there's some sort of consensus emerging around the idea that the current model, whatever the future model should be, the current model is probably not fit for purpose.
Absolutely. We see that 5,000 households per week are cancelling their TV licence because they realise they don't actually need to pay for it. You know, if you're only watching on-demand content, which the vast majority of young people do these days, and also growing numbers of people sort of over 30, and you don't actually need a TV licence. And the more and more people find this out, the more they're just cancelling and saying, actually, I don't watch live broadcast TV anymore. So, and also it's completely unpoliceable because if people come into your home to check whether or not you're watching live TV, it's very hard for them to prove. They actually have to catch you in the act. The whole thing is unfair as well because it discriminates against women. 74% of those who are prosecuted for non-payment are women. So there's clearly something deeply troubling going on in the way they go about that as well.
Agree, as this House of Lords report highlights as well, that something does need to change in terms of how it's funded. I just wondered, going almost back a step, do you think it should be taxpayer funded at all, or would you prefer an entirely privatised model? Or, is there some room, shall we say, to have like some kind of fee or tax in the general population to prop the BBC up?
I just don't think that there is the hunger there for people to want to pay for the BBC out of general taxation. We're living in, extreme cost of living crisis at the moment, and paying that amount of money out of general taxation when you can see clearly that people are flooding away from the BBC. People are no longer consuming public sector broadcasting in the way that that they used to. Times are changing, and I think it would be a massive step backwards to say to people, okay, we're going to now put this into general taxation, and you're all going to pay for this thing, which is deeply unpopular. So I think it would be a huge misstep from a Conservative government to make that decision. And what they need to do is the BBC needs to move forward into the 21st century and embrace a private funding model.
About the soft power elements of the BBC, the World Service, the free-to-air radio service and indeed television that appears in other countries around the world, that doesn't necessarily make commercial sense for the BBC, but does provide good value to our foreign policy in general. Isn't that something that, even if it's carved off, should be supported through taxation or a similar means?
Well, currently the World Service is actually funded via general taxation at the moment. You know, it's not funded by the license fee. So I don't, you know, I think that is, as you say, it's about soft power, and that's a separate issue about pushing forward and making this sort of messaging available. But also at the same time, we do have supporters from across the world who are very frustrated with the bias that they see from the BBC. You know, people in Kashmir or people across the Middle East who are, you know, extremely upset that the BBC are basically doing the same thing that they do here, which is pushing one side of an agenda. So, you know, whilst it may be having some sort of effectiveness on soft power in certain regions.
Can I just, I wanted to pick up your point there on a one-sided agenda, because I think the same can be said of organisations like Disney, for example, organisations owned by billionaires, Amazon, for example, with Jeff Bezos. They're also pushing often a one-sided agenda, a one-sided cultural agenda as well. And personally, as somebody who has a child, we have Amazon, we have Netflix, we have Disney Plus, we have all of those. And in a way, I kind of trust the BBC more with my child, because at least I know it's accountable to British taxpayers rather than some, you know, billionaires somewhere in Silicon Valley.
Yeah, I see your point, but obviously you are more comfortable there. And wouldn't it be better, you know, that everybody had the choice to you know, to what they want their child to watch and which agenda they're comfortable with? And at the moment, there isn't that choice there. You know, we don't have to pay for Disney, we don't have to pay for Amazon. We have that freedom, and you know, a lot of people are deeply uncomfortable with the agenda that the BBC are pushing, particularly for young children as well. So it's about choice, and it's about the fact that, you know, how we consume media has changed, and you know, we're not, young people aren't watching live broadcast TV. They're watching, you know, YouTube mainly, and you know, on demand, Netflix, Amazon, all of those kinds of things. And we can't carry on pushing ahead trying to fund the BBC by, you know, backtracking and going into general taxation. It just doesn't make any sense.
So what is the preferred issue here then? Because I think a lot of people, were they to want to watch the BBC, and most analysis does show that people do want to watch the BBC, so there would be a significant number of people paying to some sort of subscription service, I suppose. What if the licence fee then, if it became something voluntary, were to rise? The licence fee does cost less than a Netflix subscription currently per service, I believe I'm right in saying. If you were to take just a small part of what is offered, if you were to take BBC Film, for example, and compare the amount of content, you can do a lot of maths to show that the value for money currently of the licence fee is quite competitive. Would that have to rise?
Well, I think that if it was forced into being a privately funded, then that would be, you know, based on how the consumer felt about it, wouldn't it? At the moment, the BBC has far less content on iPlayer compared to Netflix. You know, they put things on and take things off fairly frequently, and there isn't they're not producing the new drama in the way that Netflix and Amazon Prime are. So, but I think what it comes down to is the fact that people aren't, you know, you sort of said that people there still want to watch the BBC, but we see that, you know, 1 in 20 of those under the age of 30 don't watch live programming every day, and a third don't watch BBC at all, and that's people under 30. So there's a huge change coming that the BBC needs to prepare itself for. So yeah, I think from our point of view, it should be down to those people who want to pay for the BBC as to how they're prepared to fund it, whether that's through a subscription model or some other form, either advertising or what have you, then that's for them. But the point is, many people don't want to fund the BBC because they're not comfortable with the BBC's agenda.
Okay, well, Rebecca, Ryan, thank you for joining us this morning to discuss that. Obviously, an issue relevant to everybody in the country. Campaign director at Defund the BBC there. Now, we're going to pivot onto something quite different to what we've been talking about this morning, gold diggers. Because Shashmita Sen was the first Indian woman to win Miss Universe in 1994 and is a very successful Bollywood actor. However, none of those achievements seemed to matter when she started dating Lalit Modi, who's a 58-year-old businessman and founder of the Indian Premier League, the famous cricketing competition. Well, this has opened doors to some cruelty against her on the internet. Lots of people accusing her, Miss Sen, of being a gold digger. And so we thought it was interesting to discuss this because dating patterns are changing, actually. It's in all sorts of ways. People aren't in traditional marriages anymore. And I find it quite offensive in a way to suggest that a woman who does earn her own money, to be fair, just because you date a wealthy person, you're called a gold digger. I don't think it's right.
Well, let's discuss this some more. Joining us to talk about this is Tonya Buxton, broadcaster, author, chef and friend of the channel. Thanks so much for joining us here. It is so interesting. I suppose, first of all, is there anyone at all on the earth who could date a billionaire without being described as a gold digger?
Well, people love to call names, don't they? They just love to call names. And this is just the most... I was incensed when I read about this, so incensed, because she is a complete success career-wise herself. And she's a very wealthy woman herself. So what we're looking in degrees of millions now, are we? You know, she is a multimillionaire herself, and yet they still... And it's derogatory to women. That's where it comes from.
Sunak, because his wife's a billionaire, would they?
No, well, exactly. That's what I'm saying. It's misogynistic, it's sexist, and that's what annoys me most. But can I just add to the point is... When a woman gets to a certain age, people are saying, oh, she's only after him for his money. But she's a 45-year-old woman. She, of course, will be going for someone who is a success because that would be an attractive quality. Because you go for someone who's done well in their life and maybe earns a bit of money, doesn't necessarily make you a gold digger. It just makes you practical and it becomes an attractive quality. I'm 54 years old.
You don't look it, obviously.
Thank
you. Don't need to say that.
But if I was looking for a man now who is 60 or 65 or whatever, I would expect him to be a successful man. Not because I'm after money, but it reflects on what his character's like. And he'll have the characteristics that I need in a man, a strong, successful, dynamic person. So this man is nearly 70 years old. He's done really well in his life. That would be attractive, irrelevant of the number of the figures that he earns.
That's an interesting point, though. I suppose to some extent, then, is the word gold digger that derogatory? If we're saying it's totally legitimate, which, of course it is, any free individual can choose who they want to date. If it's a legitimate thing, why is gold digger then a bad word to say?
I admit it all depends on how you perceive it. It's a derogatory term. But as I said, most people, most women in particular, you get to middle age and you think, well, I'm not going to start... It doesn't matter how artistic and handsome and how many abs a man has got. If he hasn't made a success of his life by the time he gets to middle age as well, it's not that attractive.
Yeah.
And it's nothing to do with the money itself. It's about personality traits.
And I suppose money is just one avenue of success. There are other ways to be successful as well.
And she went out with many men. Many men, no, not that she went with, but quite a few handsome young men that didn't have anywhere near the type of financial stability that she has from her earnings, from her career. And they don't get called names.
Isn't that so interesting as well? We sort of saying she went out with many men because for a woman that seems like a bad thing. Whereas if you're a man who's gone out with lots of women, that makes you a player.
Do you know, the thing is we are trying to be more progressive, but you cannot rule out years and years of what's happened before, and it's ingrained, and it's going to be slow steps forward, isn't it, to change the way people think.
Can I play devil's advocate, though? Because I can already hear it in my head. There'll be lots of younger men and older men as well, maybe, saying, but gold diggers are absolutely a thing. You cannot convince me otherwise. I know there'll be many men who know women, many friends of mine who think that certain women have only dated them because they're wealthier or because their parents are wealthy, for example. So it is a thing, isn't it? Let's not pretend women don't go after men for their money in some cases.
So I'm a real classic nouveau riche immigrant's daughter. So my parents came over with nothing and they did really well. And all they wanted is for us, the girls, to marry rich men because they thought that would be our safety net. And so some of that conditioning does tip into your head. Unfortunately, it didn't tip into mine. I married a pauper, handsome one. But, you know, so you have to look at it for what it is. Is this, are you being practical, thinking, hang on a minute, I want to... If you go back to our DNA, women want to... The kind of traditional thing is you want to have children and you want someone who's going to be able to provide for you and your children. It's a safety net. It's a kind of subconscious safety net. If it's done with that in mind, then you can accept it. But if you're just going out so you can have handbags and shoes with someone who's got money, then that's a completely different thing and you've got to get it into context.
I suppose one way that we can very easily just decide if someone is a gold digger or otherwise is how long the marriage lasts.
Exactly. That's very true. You know, if someone's in it for the long term, they've had family and they initially might have been attracted to someone because they were safe and they last forever, then how lovely.
Whereas a speedy divorce and taking half the stuff, that's another kettle of fish, isn't it?
There's a red flag there, isn't it? Or when I do always raise an eyebrow when it's like a 25-year-old beautiful woman with a 90-year-old man. I am a bit like, come on, mate.
But haven't they got a bargain going there? Haven't they got a bargain going there? And aren't they adults? So it's up to them to strike that bargain.
I don't think anyone's saying this should be banned.
No.
But I think in some cases it should be rightly mocked.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what? I think the man's getting, if anything, the man's getting more. If it's a 90-year-old man with a 25-year-old woman, I mean, he's probably getting more out of it than she is because he gets to be with a 25-year-old woman.
But what if he pops his clogs and she gets left with everything? Then she gets off.
No, it's a marvellous bargain, isn't it?
Ultimately, you really want to end up with someone for love. I'm a true romantic.
Here,
and you want to go for love. Money and anything that brings with you can't compare to falling in love properly.
Well, what a lovely note to end this conversation on. Tanya Baxton, thank you so much for coming in and talking through an interesting story, one I hadn't heard before, actually. It's
interesting. We don't talk about things like this, do we? Well, let's talk about something completely different.
Yes, the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan.
Yes.
He is giving a speech at an International Climate Solutions Summit. Let's go to him now.
Welcome. It's my pleasure to have you here in our great capital. For those that are here, you're what I unofficially called Tenerife on the Thames. Mark, thank you not only for introduction but for all the vital work you're doing as the Executive Director of C40. We talk about adaptation as a consequence of climate change. I didn't realise, Mark, it extends to your wardrobe. Good to see one of us, Mark, who dressed for the occasion. Can I also thank Dr. Maria Naira and the World Health Organization for their support for the event and for pushing more stringent air quality standards across the globe. The prescription Maria has given doesn't require water to be taken with it. We know doctors are the most trusted profession amongst voters, and Rosamund's right. It's really important that medics speak up. Maria, I have been asked, though, by my staff not to have another meeting with you because they're worried you may inspire me to organise another event. And so if we're kept apart, it's because they're worried. I'm creating more work for them. I also want to thank the Mayor of Sofia, Jadranka Fandakova, for her fantastic climate leadership. I'm really, really in awe of your bravery for launching the first low-emission zone in Eastern Europe. I was really excited when I was preparing for today to read you're now in your 4th term as mayor, and I can't wait to come and tell my wife of the inspiration you've given me going forward. And of course, I want to pay tribute to Rosamund for her remarkable strength and courage. Rosamund's tireless campaigning, as you've heard, inspired by her daughter, Ella, reminds us that air pollution isn't an abstract problem. It's not about numbers, but a devastating reality that we simply must address. She's been a great mentor and teacher to me, and proof that you can teach an old dog new tricks. So thank you, Rosamund, for your amazing work. You know, under normal circumstances, I might open by making a joke about the famous British weather. But the heat wave we're experiencing now, a heat wave that poses a threat to life, and which will make our air quality far worse, is no laughing matter. Together with the other extreme weather events we've recently witnessed around the world, it provides a glimpse into the volatile and dangerous future that awaits us if we failed to get a grip with the climate emergency right now. You'll all be aware that it was Greta Thunberg who said, "Our house is on fire." Well, she's not wrong. The threat we face is urgent, it is existential, and it has already arrived on our doorsteps. But crucially, we're not powerless to act. We can do something about it. In fact, I'm confident our cities can take a leading role in beating back the flames, overcoming this challenge, and bringing our climate under control. In London, we're certainly determined to play our part, and I'm proud that we're showing what bold and ambitious climate action looks like. Since taking office, our administration has made record investments in green jobs, skills and infrastructure as part of our Green New Deal for London. We've committed to making London net zero by 2030. We've delivered a fivefold increase in protected cycle lanes, and we've put more electric and hydrogen-powered buses on our roads, cleaned up our taxi fleet and delivered thousands of new electric vehicle charging points. But that's not all we've done, because we've also introduced and then expanded the ultra-low emission zone, one of the most far-reaching environmental initiatives implemented anywhere in the world. And Yudanka, I know it's hard. You have loud, vocal opponents. But the ULEZ, as we call it, has been transformative. It's had a transformative impact, meaning millions more Londoners are now breathing cleaner air every day. And today, I'm pleased to announce that 6 months on from its expansion, nearly 94% of vehicles seen driving in the zone on an average day meet its strict emission standards. And that's up from 39% when we first launched the ULEZ. As a result, levels of harmful nitrogen dioxide in inner London are estimated to be 20% lower than would otherwise be the case.
Well, there, Sadiq Khan giving an undoubtedly fascinating speech about his ultra-low emission zones. It's a climate summit
stuff.
in London.
I've never been so enthused in my entire life.
He has a remarkable quality to make anything that he's saying sound profoundly uninteresting.
Yeah, I mean, I know Londoners did vote for the man, so I don't want to offend, half of the London population, but goodness me, he's dull.
I'm down to the joke that he kicked off with. Tenerife on Thames. I mean, at least it's a terrible joke, and politicians make terrible jokes all the time, but at least put some feeling into it.
Yep, indeed. Well, keep all your thoughts coming in to us on email, gbviews@gbnews.uk. We will be back in just a moment with more of today's top stories and plenty of your views after this break.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today. I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GBNews.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
A very good morning. This is To The Point on GB News with me, Tom Harwood, and Mercy Maroki. We're online on your TV and on your radio. We'll hear up until midday with a show jam-packed full of today's biggest stories, lots of discussion, expert guests and our opinions as well as yours.
You're very. I wish Sadiq Khan was as enthusiastic as you. We were just listening to Sadiq Khan a moment ago. Our reporter's going to be speaking to him later on. He was so dull.
Well, you'd think if you'd got to the position of being Mayor of London, you'd have a bit of charisma, a bit of uniqueness, a bit of talent.
He's never seen charisma in his life, that man. But anyway, make sure you get in touch with your views, as usual, gbviews@gbnews.uk. We will be getting to them throughout the show. But first, let's give you the latest headlines with Rosie.
Good morning, it's 1 minute past 11. I'm Rosie Wright, keeping you up to date today on GB News. The UK has recorded its hottest night on record, with temperatures staying over 25 degrees in places. Many areas have already recorded temperatures above 30 degrees this morning. That is higher than this time yesterday. Well, let's find out more. Our reporter Ellie Costello is at London Field's Lido. Ellie, how hot are we expecting it to get?
Well, Rosie, it's already 35 degrees here at London Fields Lido, and you can see how many people are enjoying this hot weather behind me, but it's expected to get a lot hotter today, up to 42 degrees in some parts of the country, from Yorkshire to the home counties. And if that happens, it will be a day for the history books. The United Kingdom has never before seen temperatures of 42 degrees. And as you said, last night was the hottest on record. It was 29 degrees in some parts of the country, which helps to explain why so many of us may have struggled to sleep. But there is a fresh warning this morning to avoid open water swimming after it's believed that 5 people have drowned since Sunday in rivers and in reservoirs. So the warning this morning is, if you want to swim and keep cool, head to a Lido or put up a paddling pool in your garden. But the general advice today is to stay hydrated, stay out of that midday sun and wear your sunscreen.
Ellie, thank you very much. Our reporter there at London Fields Lido, where already 35 degrees. More on the heatwave to come today. Now, Conservative MPs are preparing for the penultimate round of voting to choose the next leader of the party. Tom Tugendhat became the latest contender to be eliminated last night. The former Chancellor, Rishi Sunak, received the largest backing from MPs, while International Trade Secretary Penny Mordaunt followed closely behind. Foreign Secretary Liz Truss is also on the ballot. So too is the former Equalities Minister Kemi Badenoch, who, despite securing the fewest votes of support last night, believes she can win.
Do you feel confident? There's everything to play for. My colleagues are looking at who's going to be winning the next election, and I think I'm that candidate, so let's see what happens. Well, I think I'm getting support from all wings of the party. I'm the unity candidate as well as the change candidate.
Candidates just have an hour left to make their pitches to the party before the next round of voting starts. Conservative MP Mark Harper told us he believes Rishi Sunak can restore trust in the party.
He's being honest with people about the economic challenges facing the country. He's not saying the things that are easy to say, that would be convenient, but he's telling people what they need to hear. And I think our members are very realistic people. They'll listen to his message about the number one priority is defeating inflation. And I think they'll also look at how he polls across the country, and they'll see that in him they've got someone who can lead that battle to try and persuade the public to give us what will be a 5th consecutive term in a couple of years' time.
Senior Tory MP Tobias Ellwood has been expelled from the Conservative Party after he refused to support the government in yesterday's vote of confidence. Boris Johnson stripped him of the whip, meaning he'll no longer be able to vote alongside fellow MPs in the Conservative leadership election. Well, as the race to replace him ramps up, Boris Johnson is chairing his final cabinet meeting. The Prime Minister defended his record on tackling COVID and steering the economy through the pandemic and the cost of living crisis. Mr Johnson also reaffirmed the government's commitment to reaching net zero emissions by 2050. Ukrainian forces have pushed back a Russian advance in the east of the country as fighting continues. In its latest intelligence report, the UK's Ministry of Defence said Russia is struggling to keep up its advance and have been plagued by a lack of manpower and stiff Ukrainian resistance. Wages here are falling at the fastest rate since records began when taking into account rising prices. The latest data from the ONS showed paychecks dropped by 3.7% over the 3 months to May when compared against inflation. Meanwhile, the number of UK workers on payrolls had risen by 31,000 to 29.6 million between May and June. The government's expected to announce £11.5 billion worth of investment into train services in the north of England. It's going to be spent upgrading the TransPennine route, aiming to make trains between Manchester and York via Leeds more reliable, less crowded and better for the environment. By 2025, there should be 2 extra trains per hour. Journeys should be 40% faster. The Transport Secretary Grant Shapps said the investment will address the imbalance in funding between the north and the south. More than a quarter of children, some as young as 8, are on diets, including those of a healthy weight. A new study published in the Archives of Disease in Childhood, it involved more than 34,000 youngsters in England. Well, they found the rise in the number of children as young as 8 trying to lose weight. This is GB News. I'll bring you more as it happens. Now let's head back to the point.
Good morning. This is To The Point on GB News with me, Mercy Maroki, and Tom Harwood. We're on your TV, radio and online, and we're here for another hour bringing you the day's top stories and lots of discussion and views as well. Here's what's coming up.
Yes, political punters are suggesting that Prime Minister candidate Kemi Badenoch could be the kingmaker who chooses our next leader as she faces elimination later today. That's a possibility, of course. She came fourth last time round. But is it too early to rule her out as party leader herself? We'll discuss with a political commentator next.
Yes, meanwhile, the social media giant Snapchat has launched Snapchat for the web, which is a browser-based app for users to access the messaging platform without picking up their phones. Could this be concerning given children's online safety is a big issue at the moment? We're also going to be discussing online games and how that might be damaging for children's health. More on that later on in the show.
And finally, reality TV star and entrepreneur Spencer Matthews will be joining us later to discuss the non-alcoholic beverages market. Non-alcoholic beverages. As more young people turn to booze-free lifestyles, should you be jumping into this business and investment opportunity like Spencer did?
Interesting one, that. I am alcohol-free at the moment.
And I'm alcohol-heavy.
Yes,
not at the moment, actually.
Not currently at this point. We have that coming up and much more as well across the programme. We're still going to go to your views very shortly and keep them coming in. gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Well, just 4 candidates remain in the race to replace Boris Johnson. The race to replace, I love that phrase, as Prime Minister of the United Kingdom after Tom Tugendhat was eliminated last night. So here are those results of last night's ballot.
Yes, well, frontrunner Rishi Sunak, former Chancellor, of course, whose resignation pretty much triggered this whole thing, maintained his position after receiving 115 votes in last night's ballot.
Penny Mordaunt received 82 votes. That was down 1 on the previous round.
And, of course, Tobias Ellwood has had his the party whip removed this morning.
So, technically, she's sitting on 81.
Yes, indeed. And Kemi Badenoch has received 58 votes. She, of course, made it to 4th position. Tom Tugendhat was, of course, eliminated as a result after receiving the lowest number of votes at 31.
Yeah, it's a really, really interesting situation because it's a very hard race to call. I think most people accept that Rishi Sunak has probably done enough to get through to the final two. But in terms of whether it's Liz Truss, Kemi Badenoch or Penny Mordaunt who challenge him, I think it's still a very open competition.
Yeah, and it's interesting that, actually, isn't it? Because you would have expected Liz Truss to be doing much better than she has been. It's almost the perfect time for her to be running or standing in this race because she is Foreign Secretary. She, of course, has been dealing with the war in Ukraine. She's somebody was responsible at the forefront of striking trade deals after we left the European Union. This was really her moment to shine. And I don't think the leadership debate have done her any favours because she came across very stale. She wasn't particularly enthusing or inspiring, and I think she stood in contrast to the others who had a lot more charisma than her, really.
I think that's certainly true of the first debate. She did not have a good performance there, but I think the reason why she's still ahead of Kemi Badenoch, and really when we're looking at sort of the votes, the way they split, she's representing sort of the tax-cutting right of the party.
Yeah.
The reason she's still ahead, I think, and managed to stem the flow perhaps and actually gain some votes was because that second debate she was a bit more assured. She has improved, and I wonder if she's going to continue improving, or she's been at the front line of politics. She's been in the cabinet since 2013, almost a decade, has been a member of parliament for longer than that as well. Ministers, so many different briefs, so many positions. It's really, really interesting that if Kemi goes out today, and that's a big if, it's not a certainty at all. If Kemi goes out today, I think it's quite likely that all of Kemi's votes, or almost all of them, go to Liz. And in that case, she leapsfrog Penny, and she's pretty safely in the final two
Liz,
too.
of course, also has the backing of Suella Braverman, who was standing, Attorney General, who was standing at the very beginning of this race, and has the backing of key members of the European Research Group.
Jacob
Suella
Rees-Mogg,
did, and now they're going for Liz.
Mark Francois, the chairman of the ERG, Steve Baker, a lot of the big wigs, the big Brexit wigs, are saying that Liz is the person to take Brexit forward, which is ironic because she voted Remain.
Yeah, it's all very odd, but all to play for, I think, for the three women standing in this.
Certainly, and I think that's actually something that we should probably remark upon as well. That the white man came fifth and was knocked out, and everyone else left in this thing. And I don't mean to do it as to say, identity politics really, but I think it is interesting that the party that hasn't pursued positive discrimination, the party that hasn't done all women shortlists, the party that has actually let people rise up through their own talent, is the party that ends up with actually the most respect going to ethnic minorities.
I feel quite vindicated, actually, because I've been saying, anybody who's sort of followed me over the last few years knows I've been saying this for a very long time. The identity politics stuff, it's of little substance, actually, and that's why you get Labour, for example, who first elected black MPs in 1987 who are in favour of things like all women's shortlists, all black shortlists, who have been playing identity politics for a long time. They can't even get a female leader, or let alone, and I know they haven't been in power for a long time, but and then you get the Conservatives, who are supposed to be this nasty party, this racist party, and then here we are in the leadership race, 4 candidates, 3 are women, one of them an ethnic minority woman. The only man in the race is a Pakistani man whose parents were immigrants. I mean, you couldn't make it up.
It's fascinating. A woman has never finished ahead of a man in a Labour leadership contest. Last time round, all of the candidates were women apart from Keir Starmer. Keir Starmer won. The time before then, you had 4 candidates. You had Jeremy Corbyn, Andy Burnham, Lisa Nandy and Liz Kendall. And the top 2 were the men. It was Jeremy Corbyn followed by Andy Burnham. The time before that as well, the women came dead last. I think potentially there's something in the idea of all women shortlists devaluing in the minds, maybe subconsciously, but devaluing women MPs in the minds of people in the Labour Party. If just something in the back of your mind says, well, this person didn't have to work as hard as I did to get here, then maybe this person isn't as good, even if they quite probably are, maybe that stops them making it all the way to that highest of offices.
Yeah, you can guarantee that if this was the Labour leadership race at the moment and they had these candidates, this diversity of candidates, they would be shouting from the rooftops at every opportunity about how they're the diverse party, about how they've come so far. But because it's the Conservatives, of course, tumbleweed. Tumbleweed.
Well, let's move on to another issue, because regardless of the outcome of the Tory leadership contest, a senior Ukrainian government official has told GB News that he's confident Ukraine will continue to receive full support from the UK from whoever replaces Boris Johnson as Prime Minister.
Yes, well, the Deputy Defence Minister, Volodymyr Havrilov, says he's very touched by the high levels of support from all political parties and, importantly, from the British people.
Major General Havrilov told our Home and Security editor Mark White that Ukraine needs the West to send more advanced weapons systems to help halt Russian advances.
In Ukraine's second city, this is what months of Russian bombardment does. In Kharkiv's largest residential neighbourhood, there's not a building that hasn't been damaged. Although the main battles are now being waged many miles from here in the Donbass and in the south, this war of attrition is being felt far and wide. But thanks to Western-supplied advanced weapon systems, Ukraine's Deputy Defence Minister told me his country's armed forces have largely halted Russian advances. And with more high-tech weaponry, they will, he believes, be able to retake lost territory.
Given the creativity of our commanders, together with technologies we receive from the West, I have no doubts we will crush this old-fashioned Russian army with the old Soviet-type style of offensive. And they have no chances in terms of technologies.
The minister told me his country would be forever grateful for the leadership shown by outgoing Prime Minister Boris Johnson. Whoever replaces him, the Ukrainians are confident they'll still have unwavering support from the UK's political leadership and, importantly, from the British people.
We feel that energy every day from ordinary people, from political parties and different organizations in society. So I'm very impressed with the reaction of United Kingdom and Great Britain.
At this training camp in northwest England, the first of at least 10,000 Ukrainian recruits are being put through their paces. The UK's former head of Special Forces says the programme is vital in helping replace Ukrainian combat losses. But those losses are, he says, being felt just as keenly by the Russians.
And to sustain those numbers, eventually they will need to mobilise, or perhaps they'll come up with a form of words as they have done for the war. They will need more men. They're fighting along a 500-mile plus front. That's the distance from here north of Edinburgh. It consumes manpower.
The Deputy Defence Minister says the Ukrainian people are in this fight for the long haul and there will be no surrender of Ukrainian territory to Moscow.
Civil society will never accept any kind of deal related to the loss of our territories. There will be no deal with Russia.
The Ukrainian people will be hoping whoever replaces Boris Johnson that they'll be just as unequivocal in their support for the fight against Russian aggression. Mark White, GB News.
Well, thank you to Mark for that package. Really interesting stuff there. But after the break, we'll go to our regional reporters to see how the heatwave is affecting their parts of the country. After, you've guessed it, yet another weather update.
Hello again, I'm Aidan McGivern from the Met Office. The hot spell peaks today with the likelihood of temperatures never previously recorded in the UK. That's why there are weather warnings in force for extreme heat, because this kind of heat can have serious impacts. Now, there is a change on the way. Cold fronts are going to move in from the west. Already that change taking place towards the far southwest, parts of Northern Ireland as well. Cooler compared to yesterday, but for the vast majority, it's sunny. It's breezy, yes, but it's still very hot, with temperatures peaking by the middle of the afternoon up into the high 30s and even 40 or 41 Celsius, somewhere between London into the Midlands and Lincolnshire likely to be the hot spot. Scotland also likely to see its hottest day on record, 35 Celsius in the far southeast of Scotland, but cooler for Northern Ireland, for southwest England, low to mid-20s here. And we're going to see showers move across the whole of the country overnight, perhaps some thunder associated with these downpours as the heat clears away. And then still a warm night to come, but nowhere near as warm as it was last night. So slightly more comfortable. And a bright start for many on Wednesday. It's looking fine in the east, certainly first thing, with some sunshine. A few showers in the west for Wales, the southwest, and some rain perhaps turning up across eastern parts of Scotland. By the afternoon, as temperatures rise once again, we'll see some heavy downpours for central and southeast England. And in the east of England, temperatures will still reach 29 or 30 Celsius, but it's more comfortable elsewhere, I think. Low to mid-20s largely further west. And really we're back to more typical summer weather rather than this extreme heat that we've seen over the last couple of days. And so the outlook looks mostly fine. There'll be some showers around, particularly on Friday. Otherwise, some sunny spells and temperatures into the high teens or low 20s.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Join me, Darren Grimes, for Real Britain every Saturday and Sunday from 2 p.m. A news hour that comes with a trigger warning. Scorching hot opinion with prominent guests saying the unsayable and a little bit of weekend fun thrown in. Unlike other broadcasters, I won't be forgetting what the B in our name stands for. So howie in for Real Britain Saturday and Sunday from 2 p.m.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
Good morning, it's 11:23 and this is To The Point with me, Mercy Moroki and Tom Harwood. On GB News, we're live on your TV, online and radio this morning.
That's right. Now let's get to some of those views that you've been writing to us throughout the programme today. Remember, gbviews@gbnews.uk if you want to join in the conversation. Now, I have to say, Mercy, we did mention a couple of times it was your birthday.
Oh, did you mention that? I thought I forgot to mention that.
And both Terry and Mark have written in to say, happy birthday, Mercy. Terry says, you bring a breath of fresh air each day to the TV. And Mark says, I hope you have a lovely day today. You're the best person on TV.
Well, let's not state the obvious, Mark, eh? No, thank you both, Terry and Mark, and anybody else who said happy birthday to me. I don't have any birthday plans, to be honest. Don't really. I'm not a big birthday person, despite the fact I've been telling literally everyone I come across for the last few days that it's my birthday.
Well, I know that we're going to be talking about some non-alcoholic drinks a bit later, and earlier today I suggested that you might want to go get absolutely sloshed this evening. But you told me something that I felt embarrassed to not have known before today.
Yeah, I've stopped drinking. I'm a few months into my non-drinking life, and I love it, so I won't be going back. And we are actually speaking to Spencer Matthews earlier. He used to be on Made in Chelsea. He started a non-alcoholic, what would you call it? A non-alcoholic beverage brand,
something
yes.
Like.
So we're going to be speaking to him. I have some issues with non-alcoholic alcohol substitute type things, but anyway, Ronald has said, I like Tom Harwood's slim tie. Nice to see them coming back.
Very good. You know what? Do you know what? It's not the first time that I've worn a slim tie. I always wear slim ties. It's my compromise, really.
Yeah, it's because you usually wear a jacket.
I usually wear a jacket, so you can't really see as well. But given that it's quite so warm yesterday and today, I've forgone the jacket.
Yeah, I think we've turned into loose women for a second. Let's actually speak about some of the political views.
Yes, the substance of the show.
Yes. Well, Andrew has said, I do not believe that Rishi Sunak is electable either now as leader of the Conservative Party or in a future general election competing against Labour. Andrew says he's from a wealthy background, is married to a billionaire, has lived and worked in the USA where he still has a home, his wife has held non-domicile tax status, etc., etc. And he says as Chancellor presiding over the highest level of tax for decades, he has no real answers and is advocating more of the same.
Yeah, I think the second half of that point is a lot more compelling than the first half. I don't care that Rishi Sunak is very rich.
Yeah.
I don't care that he has a house in America. I don't care that his wife is from a billionaire family. I do care that he raised taxes to their highest level in 70 years.
Yes.
That's the thing.
But you can't, I don't think you can... I forget the word I mean. I don't think you can separate those two things together. Yes, OK, we don't have to care he's from a billionaire background or his wife's from a billionaire background and he's very wealthy. But when you are that and you've raised taxes to the highest level and you're saying you relate to people in a cost of living crisis when you absolutely don't, then it becomes a bit of an issue, I think.
Although, I don't know, I don't think any single MP really relates to people in a cost of living crisis. Even those that have come from sort of really tricky situations in their upbringing, they're all on over 80k at the moment. They're all doing very well in their lives. No MP has to struggle to heat their home, has to struggle to live, and that's just a fact of anyone in our elected politics.
Keep your views coming in, gbviews@gbnews.uk. Let's go back, shall we, to that big story of the day, which is that it's likely to be the hottest day ever in the United Kingdom today, with highs of 42 degrees Celsius expected later this afternoon.
Yes, the Met Office has issued a red extreme heat warning covering much of central, northern and southeast England.
Yes, well, let's cross to our East Midlands reporter, who's been looking at the travel disruption the heatwave has caused, with trains across the country now running at reduced services. Will Hollis has this report.
Even the smallest relief from the heat can help, but travelling by train in a heat wave brings little joy. Much of the country is facing cancellations and crawling speeds. In Nottingham, at the heart of the red weather warning, passengers chance their luck.
I have delayed in Derby for 20 minutes, and now it's like I need to wait another 40.
I have to go to London via Nottingham instead of from Lincoln today because I've cancelled all the train services.
I think we're good. I should be heading off in about 15 minutes, so yeah, I'm the lucky one.
On East Midlands Railway's intercity routes, 2 trains an hour drops to 1. On some regional routes, the odds are much worse, and the East Coast Main Line from Leeds to London King's Cross has been scrapped altogether from midday. In extreme heat, tracks pass 50 degrees Celsius and can buckle at the normal speeds. Network Rail is advising you not to travel.
A lot of our infrastructure that we have is designed and maintained to operate safely around 38 degrees. So that 3 degrees further puts tremendous stress on the system.
How big of an impact could this have if you didn't bring in these measures?
The heat wave and these exceptional temperatures that we're going to encounter, particularly along the East Coast main line, means that the tracks themselves simply extend in the heat and become much longer, and there's a risk of them buckling, and that's why we need to slow down the train so that we don't create that risk and we maintain passengers' safety.
Soaring temperatures are pushing the UK up and over records. A red weather warning hangs over most of England. It's being described as an emergency with a risk to life. Last July, 1,600 people died because of heat, according to the Health and Security Agency.
We're going to see temperatures in the East Midlands of 39 and 40 degrees in various bits of the East Midlands. So that threshold of 25 degrees where people start to feel strain is going to be well exceeded. So we are expecting to see problems. Our monitoring of hot weather situations from previous years in the UK make it really clear that we get a lot of people becoming unwell and a good number of people dying when it gets this hot.
Back in Nottingham, the city centre's summer beach is returning. Trains are expected to run normally between Nottingham and Skegness, but at a time when travel is discouraged, skipping the seaside is becoming more tempting. Will Hollis for GB News in the East Midlands.
Well, thanks to Will for that view from the East Midlands. But let's now go to our Scotland reporter Davy Donaldson, who joins us from near Fife. Well, Davy, hello. In Scotland, it's normally not quite as hot as it is in southeast England. Are you feeling the heat today?
I'm certainly feeling the heat yesterday, there's no doubt about that, because it was 33 degrees yesterday out and about. I was in Glasgow and then back home as well, and it was very, very hot indeed. Here we're getting a little bit of respite in Burnt Island, famous place in Fife, where we've got a fun fair just over there. Oh, next to me here's the beach, and lots of people, lots of families out there on the beach. Out in the tide's out, so they're going out, picking up shells and the like. We can see people over my shoulder on the beach as well, but we are getting a bit of respite because it is overcast at the moment. However, that's not going to be the case throughout the day. We're going to get somewhere around about 30, perhaps even higher across Scotland, 32 degrees, which for Scotland is extremely warm. We don't normally get the weather, as you say, that you get down in the southeast of England. But yeah, absolutely brilliant setting here. Lots of families on the beach behind me, lots of people looking to soak up the sunshine. We've got the fairground over there. I spoke to one of the people from there earlier and just asking them what they do, so we'll find out a bit more about that later on. But yeah, they have to take some precautions, obviously, due to the extreme heat that we're finding ourselves in, which has been extremely difficult for people, and a lot of people obviously being encouraged to drink plenty of water and try and stay out the sun when they possibly can.
Well, Davy, thank you for that. I suppose to some extent, it's Scotland's getting the best of the lot over these couple of days. It's not, you can be outside probably for the whole day without the same sort of risks that 40 degrees does. 33 does sound really lovely.
Yeah, really lovely. 33 we can deal with. Davy, thank you for joining us, and hope you enjoyed the weather over there. Now, after the break, is the growing non-alcoholic movement one you should be signing up for? Well, TV star Spencer Matthews did just that. In fact, he launched his own non-alcoholic beverage brand, and he'll be joining us to tell us why he did this and why maybe you should try and go non-alcoholic after these headlines.
It's 11:32. I'm Rosie Wright, keeping you up to date on GB News. The UK has provisionally recorded its hottest night on record, with data from the Met Office showing overnight temperatures didn't fall below 25 degrees in some places. Red extreme heat warnings continue today for millions of people in England, with amber warnings for large parts of Wales and Scotland. Temperatures are forecast to hit at least 40 degrees later today. That will break records. Conservative MPs are preparing for the penultimate round of voting to choose the next leader of the party. The former Chancellor, Rishi Sunak, received the largest backing from MPs, whilst International Trade Secretary Penny Mordaunt followed closely behind. The Foreign Secretary Liz Truss is in the running. So too is former Equalities Minister Kemi Badenoch, who yesterday secured the lowest share of votes. But speaking this morning, she says she believes she could win.
Do you feel confident? There's everything to play for. My colleagues are looking at who's going to be winning the next election, and I think I'm that candidate, so let's see what happens. Well, I think I'm getting support from all wings of the party. I'm the unity candidate as well as the change candidate.
The MP, Tobias Ellwood, has been expelled from the Conservative Party after he refused to support the government in yesterday's vote of confidence. Boris Johnson stripped him of the whip, meaning he'll no longer be able to vote alongside MPs in the Conservative leadership election. Mr Ellwood had been supporting Penny Mordaunt. Wages are falling at the fastest rate since records began when taking into account rising prices. The latest ONS data showed paychecks dropped by 3.7% over the 3 months to May when compared against inflation. Meanwhile, the number of UK workers on payrolls has risen by 31,000 to 29.6 million between May and June. TV, online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy $1.203. The pound will buy 1.172 euros. The price of gold currently stands at £1,425 and 41 pence per ounce.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for physical investment.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Welcome back to The Point. It's 11:37 and this is To The Point with me, Tom Harwood, and Mercy Maroki on GB News. We're live on your TV, online and, of course, DAB+ radio this morning.
Yes, now, obviously, we've been discussing how hot it is this morning, and many of you will probably want to cool down with a cold beer or something in the garden or wherever you are today. And yesterday, we looked at how 1 in 3 pub visits are actually now dry pub visits, which means people aren't having alcohol when they go to the pub. And in fact, there's a name for it. It's called sober curious. It's like bi-curious, but obviously different.
Everyone's curious about everything these days.
Yes, well, it's becoming a trend, apparently, amongst young people who are experimenting with sobriety, which sounds like a really annoying Hollywood thing to say.
Well, for those living in La Novino Loco... Sorry, the auto cue says living La Novino Loco. I mean, wow,
living
that's
Novino
just...
Loco.
OK.
No, I mean, yeah, but
it's... No, grand. I mean, tremendous. I'm sure the pun works written down better than it does out loud, or perhaps vice versa. Anyway, for those looking for a new investment, perhaps, or to go sober, how is the beverage market responding to this trend? What opportunities are there for non-drinkers or for investors alike.
Yes, well, our next guest went sober shortly before becoming a father and has recently founded his own non-alcoholic beverage company, which is called Clean Co. You may even recognise him from the telly because he was on Only Way is... Oh, God. Made in Chelsea. I'm so sorry.
Tremendous.
That's an offensive mistake to make. He was on the posher one, Made in Chelsea.
Tremendous. Well, we're joined by Spencer Matthews, and thank you for joining us now, because I'm really interested about exactly what's going on with this non-alcoholic trend. Because these are basically drinks that are sort of pretending to be alcoholic drinks, but aren't.
Sure, yeah. I mean, just across the category, which is currently booming, you know, we focus on non-alcoholic spirits, but obviously there's loads of fantastic companies that do beer as well, and wine is becoming more of a thing. I think, you know, from speaking from experience, when I stopped drinking alcohol, you would have to kind of change your social habits, and that was almost the tougher part, you know. So I think, you know, the idea behind Clean Co is that you can enjoy a cocktail, you know, and have the same experience of drinking, say, a gin and tonic, but without the alcohol. So, you know, if you mix, you know, Clean G, our gin alternative, with tonic, it'll taste exactly like a gin and tonic. It smells like gin, it behaves like gin. So, you know, for me, I can then replace, you know, that kind of ritual almost of having an alcoholic drink with a very similar non-alcoholic drink. So it allows people to make positive choices, I suppose, around decisions with alcohol.
I completely get that. What I've found since I've stopped drinking alcohol, though, is that whenever I go to bars, and they have these mocktails on offer, don't they? But, you know, they're often like £6-7. And I just think, well, why would I just not drink an elderflower cordial, which is equally as satisfying since it's not got alcohol in it either? What's the difference? Why are they so expensive, these mocktails? I mean, you can just get an orange juice, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. No, well, look, I agree. And mocktails is precisely kind of one of the reasons why I got into this, because mocktails typically are just a bunch of juices, you know, with a pineapple or a banana in it, and stuff that you typically wouldn't want to drink on a night out, very sugary ordinarily and not particularly good for you. And then, of course, there's the opportunity in my eyes to trade up from a soft drink. So, you know, to your point, the soda water and the elderflower cordial is a delicious drink. But I've personally found when I was out with friends who were drinking alcohol, and I was, say, having the elderflower cordial with the soft drink, you still kind of, you're compromising on social experience and not quite fitting in. So also, it goes without saying that creating these non-alcoholic alternatives is quite an expensive process. The category is quite young, and it's new and it's fresh. And most independent brands aren't at huge scale. So the cost of goods of creating the spirits and the new product development that goes into it is a really expensive process. And I guess that's reflected in the price, although, you know, we do try and be competitive in the market that we're in. And, you know, as Clean Co's cost of goods decreased, you know, so when it became cheaper for us to create the same goods because we had become a larger company, we gave that back to the customer with a lower retail price just to be more competitive. So we will always do what we can on price.
Really interesting, this sort of notion of a ritual of drinking that you mentioned. I'm not sure if I consciously enter a ritual, because I think I mainly drink because of the effect of alcohol rather than the taste of it or anything else. But I suppose to some extent, this is about fitting in. This is about presenting, sort of not looking out of place when you're going out with friends who are drinking.
Yeah, I mean, again, all of what I'm saying is just from my own personal experience. I can't really speak for others, but, you know, I had a number of jobs where drinking alcohol was perceived to be almost a skill. You know, I was a city trader. I had to entertain clients. Then I worked in nightclubs, you know, so it was ordinary for me to have a drink in my hand. And I guess, you know, when I became more health conscious and more conscious of my kind of general well-being and, you know, wanted to improve my functionality so that I could achieve my goals more easily, I found that cutting out alcohol was really helpful for me. But, you know, there was still that moment where I'd get back from the office, say, at 6 p.m. or 7 p.m., and I'd ordinarily pour myself a drink or a glass of wine. And that was what I found difficult to kick. It wasn't necessarily, you know, I wouldn't really be drinking to get drunk.
Especially on a hot summer day like we've been seeing recently. I've been really sort of... There is nothing more refreshing to me.
We seem to have empty chairs, Spencer Matthews.
I think we've just... we'll get him back there. There we go. I seem to think that on a hot day, there is nothing more refreshing than something like an alcoholic drink, sitting out in a pub garden or something like that. And I suppose that's a feeling. That's not about getting drunk. Yeah. That's just a sort of feeling of the sort of drink that you're drinking.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I used to be a big gin and tonic drinker, and now when I have a clean gin and tonic, it does a very similar thing for me. It's kind of a very grown-up, feels a very grown-up drink, tastes like there's alcohol in the drink, you know, to the point now where we compare ourselves to full-strength equivalents. And when we're out sampling, we'll give strangers, you know, potential customers, a full-strength gin and tonic and a clean gin and tonic. And they often can't tell the difference. And many people say they prefer the taste of the clean gin and tonic. And then we tell them that there's no alcohol, and they, you know, understand that perhaps there might be an opportunity in their day or week or lives to make that decision. You know, it's a very similar thing that we're doing to some of the big beer brands. You know, Heineken Zero is one of the fastest growing beers in the world, if not the fastest.
Just very finally here, Spencer, is this not just a fad? I mean, how long is it going to last that we're seeing 1 in 3 pub visits not drinking alcohol? Is this something that is just a bit of a flash in the pan? How do you know that this is a market that will actually sustain and not just sort of go away like other fads we've seen before?
Because it's driven by people's desire to be healthier, I think, and that's a fad that, well, that's not a fad. That's, you know, that's evident across a number of different markets. You know, food, training, you know, therapy, mental well-being, you know, just general health and wellness is incredibly important to people, particularly the younger generation. I actually think it will get more. So I believe that, you know, in 5 years' time, perhaps it'll be entirely ordinary to have non-alcoholic cocktails, but, you know, at a higher level than the previously discussed mocktail. So, yeah, I believe that in time, it'll be like a 50-50 thing.
That's a really, really interesting perspective there. Spencer Matthews, thank you very much for joining us here on GB News. Really appreciate your time and perspective on that issue.
Yes, absolutely. I think I might actually, after work later, when I'm done, I might get a non-alcoholic beer.
See how you feel about it.
Because I haven't tried these non-alcoholic alternatives to traditional alcohol. I might try it and see if it does replicate that same experience.
Do you know what I found to be very funny as we were talking about being incredibly health conscious and everyone wanting to be so much more healthy? I can see something going on behind that camera over there. I can see a little bit of... Yep, no, it's a cake. It's a cake on a plate. It's coming over here. Here it is. Oh, what, marvellous. And it's got 5 candles on it, so I can only presume it's for Is there someone here today who's got a birthday? Is there? Well, I mean, let me. Our producer Rob just brought it in, but I will now do the final few inches.
And I'm 5 years old today.
To offer to you, Mercy. A very happy birthday. There's no cutlery.
Yeah.
So you're going to have to scoop it out with your hands. Yeah. Perhaps just slam it into
People would pay good money to watch that, actually. There's a market for that.
Tremendous. Well, I mean, I think it would be remiss to have done today's show without having...
Since I've been banging on about it for the last couple of days, eh?
Absolutely. We couldn't possibly do this show without a lovely cake. And it's got... What sort of cake is
walnut. Coffee and walnut is my guess.
Coffee and walnut. So that'll wake you up at the very least as well.
I don't drink coffee either. I'm very dull.
Oh, no, talking about... It's the perfect time to have brought out a cake. Talking about being so health conscious, talking about avoiding all of these stimulants, and now here we're going. This is caffeine.
Well, you need one vice. Yeah.
Yeah, no,
My vice is cakes and sweets.
Calories and caffeine, two of the best. Two of the best.
Well, let's move this cake, shall we? Whilst we discuss.
I think we're going to have to eat some. We're going to have to bring out.
Cutlery.
We're going to have to bring some cutlery over in a second. But before we get stuck into the cake at the end of the show.
Yes, so let's discuss social media. Really big issue. This kids are being encouraged to spend more and more of their parents' money, not their own money, online. And first, there's the social media app Snapchat. They're launching a new subscription service called Snapchat Plus. So users who are mostly aged between 15 to 25 can use the app on their laptop or computer to video call and message their friends. I think this is actually particularly worrying with Snapchat, because one of the USPs of Snapchat is that it's almost entirely private. So people use it to have very private conversations because it lets you know if somebody screenshotted it. It lets you delete messages, disappear as soon as they're sent. So kids kind of use it as a way to be secretive already.
Yes.
So the fact it's moving on to computers and not just on phones does kind of worry me a tiny bit.
Although, on the other hand, if you care about the safety of children hiding away what they're doing on their devices might be harder to police for parents than something on a big computer. You're more likely to see it.
Yeah.
Perhaps, potentially, that's actually a pro-safety move.
Yeah, there is that as well. Go on.
But there's other things going on in the online world as well. So-called popular loot boxes in online games, where players can pay with real money for in-game prizes, items and bonuses. And how many times have we seen stories about some 4-year-old who's accidentally spent £200 of their parents' money buying gems on some online game or whatever? But will parents of young gamers be forking out even more money for their online activities? And will they even know about it before the bill comes in the mail?
Yes, well, joining us now is Alan Stevens, who is a social media and tech expert, or a text expert maybe as well. Thanks for coming on. My child, she's 7 years old. I have a subscription on this thing called Roblox, where every month, for about £5 a month, she gets coins, Robux, to spend on the game. And I argue that I'm teaching her how to use money wisely, because I say, look, you're only getting this amount of coins a month, so you better use it wisely. Don't go on buying items in the game that will, get rid of all your coins in one go. Budget. So surely that's a good thing.
It sounds like and happy birthday, by the way, Mercy.
Thank
and good morning
you.
to Tom. I think it is a good thing because you are teaching them skills that they'll need. You're teaching them how to budget and so on. But the problem is they can be out of control. And you mentioned stories of people getting hold of their parents' credit cards and bank cards and so on. There was a story only last month about some kids spent £550 on their father's bank card because they saw that he bought them a loot box, and they knew where his card was stored and went away and emptied the bank account. So these things, they're a form of gambling, but the government, for some reason, won't regulate them that way.
I suppose it's the really dangerous point is when you've got the in-app purchases that don't require any overview. If the child knows a password, then they can sort of run away with it all. But I suppose, on the other hand, you get a lot of these free-to-play games, and I remember I used to play these. Yeah. I don't anymore, sadly. I don't have the time, but but they are really addictive. And I suppose the reason why they're free for so many people, and so many people can get that enjoyment for free, is that for a minority of people, they pay to have extras, to have bonuses. I mean, that's not a bad model, I suppose.
Well, no, I mean, it's a very good business model, Tom. I mean, obviously, manufacturers realise that. I mean, EA Sports, one of the first people to do it in FIFA. They did it a lot, and you could buy certain players, you could build up teams that could be other teams and so on. But the problem is it can get very expensive. It can get very expensive, and it can mount up very rapidly. You can spend hundreds of pounds in a matter of an hour. And I think what it needs parental control. It needs the person who's managing the funds to be able to control, just like Mercy has done with her daughter. You've got to be able to have some measures to control that, and then it's okay. But uncontrolled, it's very dangerous.
Let's just talk about, we mentioned Snapchat there, which is anybody who has sort of a primary school age child or secondary school age child will know what Snapchat is. And should parents be concerned about Snapchat now moving on to computers and stuff as well, and sort of not just being on phones, because it can be used by children for quite sinister ends, and by adults who want to communicate to children for quite sinister ends?
You're right, Mercy. I think it's a measure of control. It's about knowing what your children are doing, and it's keeping an eye on. You can't do that when they're at school. I appreciate that, and they can get up to all sorts of things. But it's teaching them online safety. It's explaining to them what's safe to do and what isn't, what sort of things they can send and what they shouldn't, and also having them alert you if they think there's something wrong online. And I think that's educational, because we're all going to be using. We all use social media all the time. I'm slightly out of the demographic for Snapchat, I must admit, though I do have an account because I like to know what's going on. But it's about you knowing what's happening with your children and so on, and making sure they use these things safely. That's the important thing.
Yeah, it's so interesting being able to set these standards and these rules, because for most parents, they didn't grow up with these technologies. They didn't grow up with these apps. And I suppose in 20 or 30 years' time, this won't be so much of a conversation that needs to be had because everyone will remember what happened when they were children and that passes on that way. But we're at this sort of odd halfway house situation where we've got a very stark generational divide. How do we cross it?
It's a very difficult one, and I think it's education. It's understanding what goes on. I mean, you can learn very quickly how these things work. It's not very difficult, and I'm way past the age where I should be using social media, perhaps. But I've been using it for 30 years myself, and I do understand how it works. And I've taken some time to find out how you can control it and how these things can be managed. And I think it's down to us as parents and carers and so on to do that as well. We've got a little education process to go through. But unless we do that, there's all sorts of things that can happen online that could be very dangerous indeed.
Well, Alan Stevens, thank you so much for bringing us that analysis there. It's a really thorny issue and no doubt one that will not be going away anytime soon.
Thank you. Now, before we leave you for the day, we just wanted to remind you quickly that every Wednesday we hand over our show to you, which means the show is full of your ideas and full of what you want us to talk about, really. So to email in and tell us to the point at gbnews.uk. That's the email. Tell us what you want to hear us speak about tomorrow, what topics you want to hear us covering, who you think we should be speaking to. And come tomorrow, that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to dedicate the entire show to you.
I suppose, finally, today, the UK has experienced its hottest day on record already, with the temperature reaching 39.1 degrees Celsius in Charlwood in Surrey. That's according to the Met Office.
Yes, and on that very hot note, see you tomorrow. Keep safe, drink lots of water, use your common sense, and we'll see you tomorrow for our viewer-led show.
Hello again, I'm Aidan McGivern from the Met Office. The hot spell peaks today with the likelihood of temperatures never previously recorded in the UK. That's why there are weather warnings in force for extreme heat, because this kind of heat can have serious impacts. Now, there is a change on the way. Cold fronts are going to move in from the west. Already that change taking place towards the far southwest, parts of Northern Ireland as well. Cooler compared to yesterday, but for the vast majority it's sunny. It's breezy, yes, but it's still very hot, with temperatures peaking by the middle of the afternoon up into the high 30s and even 40 or 41 Celsius, somewhere between London into the Midlands and Lincolnshire likely to be the hot spot. Scotland also likely to see its hottest day on record, 35 Celsius in the far southeast of Scotland, but cooler for Northern Ireland, for southwest England, low to mid-20s here. And we're going to see showers move across the whole of the country overnight, perhaps some thunder associated with these downpours as the heat clears away. And then still a warm night to come, but nowhere near as warm as it was last night. So slightly more comfortable. And a bright start for many on Wednesday. It's looking fine in the east, certainly first thing, with some sunshine. A few showers in the west for Wales, the southwest, and some rain perhaps turning up across eastern parts of Scotland. By the afternoon, as temperatures rise once again, we'll see some heavy downpours for central and southeast England. And in the east of England, temperatures will still reach 29 or 30 Celsius, but it's more comfortable elsewhere, I think. Low to mid-20s largely further west. And really, we're back to more typical summer weather rather than this extreme heat that we've seen over the last couple of days. And so the outlook looks mostly fine. There'll be some showers around, particularly on Friday. Otherwise, some sunny spells and temperatures into the high teens or low 20s.